Welcome to Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release, a podcast dedicated to licensed wildlife rehabilitators and the veterinarians who support them. I'm your host, Gail Buell. Hey everybody, glad you joined me today. I am so excited. I know I always say that, but today I get to talk to two of my very, very, very favorite people in the entire world. I have taught with them. I have worked with them. I enjoy their company so much. And today we're going to be talking about ambassador animals, and we're going to be talking about ambassador animals with Jackie Kozlowski. She's the senior trainer at Tracy Aviary in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we're also going to be talking to Melissa Moore. She's the curator of behavioral husbandry and ambassador animals at the St. Louis Aquarium in St. Louis, Missouri. And I can't wait. So let's get to it. Oh, I'm so excited that I get to talk to the two of you. This has been 4 seasons in the making. I'm just going to have to tell you. I have to tell you because we've been trying to get together for these podcast episodes now for a while, and I'm just so excited. And maybe some of you have taken classes from us or them. I hope that you have. If you haven't, you should. But first, I want to introduce Melissa Moore. So, Melissa, say hi.
Hi, so happy to be here. This is going to be a lot of fun, and you are not exaggerating when you say this has been many seasons in the making, and even to get this scheduled this time was several weeks, I think.
Yes, we had to change a few times. Our schedules are so packed with all kinds of stuff. So before I move to Jackie, Melissa, do you want to tell everybody just a little bit of your, what I like to call origin story?
Sure. We were sort of giggling about this a moment ago because if I tried to map it all out, it's been quite a wild ride and a bit of a long one, I feel like at times to get where I am today. But I am grateful for every stop along the way. I think just reflecting on it, I think I was deeply influenced early on by visits to places like SeaWorld, where I got to see Shamu, early on. And then when I was 14 years old, I was really fortunate because I had taken a workshop where I wanted to go out and see the wolves at this wolf sanctuary near my home. And instead, we ended up stopping at the World Bird Sanctuary near my home in St. Louis. And I saw a hawk on a glove for the first time, up close and personal. And I just heard the voice inside my head say, that's what I want to do. And
Wow.
that was it. 2 years later, I started volunteering there. And it wasn't long after that I had a paying job supervising a bird show at the Milwaukee County Zoo for 3 summers. From there, I became curator of birds at the Black Hills Reptile Gardens in Rapid City, South Dakota, and was there for a number of years. And there I had the opportunity not just to manage the exhibit collection and to produce bird shows, but also to do a lot of off-site programming and sort of start that programming from almost ground zero. And after that, it was kind of a variety of things. I was executive director of New Mexico Wildlife Center, and now am curator of behavioral husbandry and ambassador animals at St. Louis Aquarium. Back in my hometown, full circle. And I think the one theme all the way through really has been this attraction towards ambassador animals, working with those animals and training, finding different ways and new ways to communicate with those animals and to communicate my passion for those animals to the people and the visitors and the guests and the public and the students that I interact with on a regular basis. So that's kind of how I got where I am and a little bit about why, I think.
Yeah, all of it. And you said full circle. That's exactly what it is full circle. And I just have to tell everybody that you've been a mentor of mine for, I don't know how long. Maybe we shouldn't tell everybody how long.
Oh,
No,
let's
maybe
stay
not.
away from that.
We'll stay away from that. And then we became friends along the way. And I can't be more grateful. I'm also incredibly grateful to be able to know, and near and dear to my heart is Jackie Kozlowski. And she's the senior trainer at Tracy Aviary. And Jackie, do you want to talk about your origin story?
Sure. Yeah. I'm so happy to be here, by the way. And I will just say that you guys have been hugely inspiring to me too. So this is a whole circle of appreciation and good memories. And this podcast will have some fun and some more good memories. But I got my start, kind of funny, Melissa, when you said yours. Uh, SeaWorld and marine mammals and Free Willy were like my childhood. That's what I wanted to do, was be a marine mammal trainer.
You stopped at marine mammal and then you paused. I'm like,
Well,
really? I wonder
there
what
was
marine mammal you would
we
be.
had a pool in my backyard, so we would play like marine mammal park. And I was always the like dolphin or the orca. And my younger sister was a good sport. She was the one like throwing balls down into the pool for me to retrieve and stuff. So maybe it was a marine mammal at heart there.
I love that.
Yeah.
I do too. I'm never going to think about you the same ever again.
Yeah. But through college, my kind of choices were to go into marine sciences. And when I was in college, I had a summer free. And so I got an internship at my local zoo. That was back in Delaware. And I was exposed to all kinds of animals for the first time. So, cats and primates and reptiles and insects and birds. And the second I started working with birds, I got hooked. Had no experience with them, hadn't really given them a second thought. And all of a sudden, I had these creatures that I was working with, and it was love at first sight. I got my first training project there working with some Andean condors, believe it or not. The very first
Wow.
bird I ever worked with was shifting Andean condors and target training them. And from there, I ended up working at that zoo for about 4 years. And then there was an opportunity at the Philadelphia Zoo to be part of their summer bird show. And they were contracted in. And I started working with birds as opposed to birds on exhibit, ambassador birds, doing free flight bird shows, and actually stuck with that company and got kind of my foundation. The organization did some breeding. We did traveling programs, working with a number of state parks and zoos and universities. On the side, I also started volunteering and then working at our local wildlife rehabilitation center, which is Tri-State Bird Rescue and Research. So I spent 7 days a week for years, just birds, 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 birds. And it hasn't really changed. I ended up moving out here to Salt Lake City at the Tracy Aviary, and believe it or not, next month is my 10-year anniversary.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh. Wow. I need to
Wild.
figure out how to celebrate, man. That's a
No.
milestone. That's a
Yeah.
milestone.
Yeah. And similar to what Melissa said, it's about working with these animals as individuals, building up relationships, but most importantly, sharing them as individuals to the public and hopefully creating that same passion and that same inspiration that hooked me and led me to where I am today.
And Jackie, I want to build on that because I think you're right. One of the things that we've talked about in other places is something else that we enjoy, and that's working with the people that we work with to share too. I've been very lucky to work with a lot of great younger folks who are just as passionate, and watching them grow their knowledge base and their skills and their passions too is every bit as rewarding, I think, sometimes as sharing with the public or even just training the animals. And it's something that we've talked about in the past, and I think worth mentioning here.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
totally
And
agree.
we always said, we got into this because we're animal people. And
Yeah.
ultimately, I found out I'm so much more of a people person. And
Yeah.
I really do enjoy like seeing not just the birds grow and develop, but the staff as well. And their excitement really reinforces me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I find that reinforcing as well. And I think, Gail, you and I have talked about that in the past too.
Oh, completely. Even when we've been teaching, people who are really wanting to do better by the animals that they're working with, or really would like to start an ambassador animal program, and they're seeking out the right information and that kind of thing. Just working with those folks is very reinforcing for me because I know that they've already made their lives better for their ambassador animals because they're trying to do best practices. And so I really, really love that. And I will work very, very hard to help
Yeah.
them as much as I can. So I totally agree with you guys. And the other thing that I really love, which I know is echoed between all three of us, is when we're working with the public and you see that like aha moment
Yeah.
and you see it. It's like a light bulb over
Hmm.
their heads. I swear to goodness, I can see it.
Hmm.
And they're all of a sudden, just like you guys said, there was that moment that you got to work with birds, and that was it. It was over. It was over. You knew it was going to be birds, and you see that in other people too, and it's wonderful to see. And I think for me, at this juncture in my career, all of us have, well, not Jackie. She's the young one of the group. But between Melissa and I, each one of
Yeah.
us have been doing this for over 30 years, right?
Hmm.
So right now, looking back, I cannot even imagine the time before I was interested in birds.
Hmm.
But I really appreciate there's so many people out there that birds are this foreign concept
Hmm.
that mammals, because I guess, we have dogs and cats and things like that in our home, and we're a mammal, so we kind of relate a little bit more. But birds seem to be just this thing out of reach that people don't think about until we help them think about it.
Absolutely. In fact, I actually do remember the time before I was into birds. I remember as a young teenager, whatever, seeing birds outside and just not getting it, not
Mhm.
understanding, and thinking, well, birds are kind of dumb. I don't know. It's just another animal. I didn't
Right.
dislike them, but I couldn't connect to them. It
Hmm.
wasn't until the door opened for me through Raptors that I was able to then expand my world and understand what was going on in birds' brains, so to speak, or in their world, what their
Hmm.
world is like. And you see the same thing though with reptiles, with amphibians, with
Right.
all the unloved animals, even well, you can go on, right? And that's one of the things that I'm finding rewarding in my current position is I'm not working so much with birds anymore, but reptiles have that same and maybe even a deeper stigma around them, and being
Hmm.
able to expose people to those animals and to have them think of those animals as individuals too, right? We have two ball pythons, for example, and they're very different animals. I mean, they're both
Hmm.
ball pythons. They both look like ball pythons. They fall into that category of behavior, but they're still individuals. They both have their individual personalities and the way they like to be handled. And that is another thing that seems to blow people's minds when they come to visit us, right? Is it has a personality. It likes certain things. It doesn't like other things.
Hmm.
I find that fascinating, and it's one of the things that's kind of becoming a talking point in our community right now is interpreting this, and they're showing that research is actually showing that if you put something on signage about an animal's likes or dislikes or its personality, those kinds of things, that it's connecting more deeply with the people who are reading and interacting with that sign and seeing that animal, observing that animal, than to just put on their, species name, where they're from. Yeah.
It's that empathy piece. And
Yes.
and you're right that reptile and amphibians are even farther, quote unquote, away from us than birds are. And they can't very seldom move their muscles on their face, at least most of the ones that I can think of that come to mind right away. And so it's hard for us to even relate to that. Birds can't either, right? I mean, they look the way they look the way they look. They don't smile, they don't have a lot of facial muscles that they can move in the ways that we are familiar with. So I think that empathy piece is incredibly critical, for us to not think of it as a garter snake as a garter snake, as a ball python as a ball python, is a tiger salamander is a tiger salamander. So I love that's what you're doing, is trying to say, well, this one likes this. Crickets are its favorite, but this one loves mealworms and will do almost anything for a mealworm. And the fact that we can also train those animals.
Yeah.
People just don't realize that, every living being on this planet is governed by the same operant learning rules as every other animal on this planet. And that also means animals like snakes and salamanders and turtles and tortoises and birds, of course,
Yeah.
and lots of other things. So how cool is that? And I didn't want to imply to anyone listening that we're just going to be talking about birds. All three of us, that's a part of our commonality, is working with birds. But I think all of us have worked with a lot of other animals, not just birds, and you have to unlock them just like you do with birds. You have to kind of figure out behavior, and you have to figure out a lot of other things, and on an individual basis, because as you will hear, it's a study of one.
Yeah, this reminds me of a story back, gosh, like 15 years ago. I was having dinner with the former curator of reptiles at the Philadelphia Zoo. And so he's a reptile person and I'm the bird person.
Hmm.
And he just point blank asked me if like I look at a bird and think, wow, that's a particularly good looking individual. Like, is that a particularly good looking red-tailed hawk? Or do you find like certain personalities with the birds? And I looked at him and was like, of course, but it was making that connection that he feels the exact same way about his reptiles.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we have more in common than you think, you know?
Oh, exactly. And
Yeah.
then even if we get even farther, if you were to talk to an entomologist
Mhm.
and you were talking about insects, that's even farther away from us, but
Mhm.
all the same things apply. So I think we've kind of answered this question, but why do we have ambassador animals? They
Where do
laugh. They're
we?
laughing. I don't know why they're laughing. It's a legitimate question.
No, no, it's so funny. I think we did kind of answer that, or at least I feel like I did. And the reason I feel like I answered that is because of my experience. When I saw that hawk on that glove when I was 14 years old, it literally changed my life, changed my trajectory, and changed how I have now dedicated my life towards working with animals, improving their welfare, and spreading the message of conservation, gotten deeper and deeper into environmental education. How many lives have I changed? I don't know. Maybe only one person has changed their mind by interacting with me over the years, but that's one more person. And to me, that ambassador animal was really the gateway. I mean, to me, it was all about seeing that this is an individual bird. It's not just a bird in the distance, and it's something I could get to know better, and I could learn to understand it. And so to me, an ambassador animal, it was the doorway. It absolutely was.
Mhm.
And I mentioned SeaWorld and the marine mammals. Same thing there. I was obsessed as a child with that. And because of that, I cared more about what happened to our oceans, and I cared more
Mhm.
about what
Mhm.
happened to the woods out behind my
Mhm.
house, and I
Mhm.
cared more about not throwing trash out of the car on the side of the road, all of those things, simply because I can name all these animals that I've worked with or that I have met,
Mhm.
in my lifetime. So I think that is a good argument for why to have ambassador animals. Jackie, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, we know Jackie,
Yeah,
wants to be a marine mammal. So,
right.
for her,
Definitely. I take it to the next level. Um,
She is
it
the
was
ambassador
funny.
animal.
she is the
Yeah,
ambassador
I
animal.
am. I'm never going to live that down.
No,
Nope.
you are not.
And Melissa, I was laughing in my head when you were saying, what you said is absolutely true. And I agree with everything, but like how many lives you've changed. And I always think of how many terrible photos of me there are in everybody's
Yes,
like scrapbooks and home videos.
And I bet it's because your mouth is always open,
always
right? Your
open.
mouth is
Yeah.
Always open.
People will record like a whole half-hour bird show, and I think, like, what are you gonna do with this?
open. But
Where's the footage ending up?
well, right. I mean, but when I have gone to other bird shows or I've gone to other zoos and I'm doing the same thing.
Oh yeah.
Even though that's been my profession for a very long time, I'm recording it. I'm taking pictures. I'm getting the pictures of the presenter with their mouth open.
You're using it for blackmail, though.
Well, okay.
Jackie, you're not supposed
Well,
to let on now. Come
Oh,
on.
sorry, our secret.
it's our secret. That's right. It's our secret.
But on a more serious note, I think ultimately, for me, it was seeing those animals that I, had stuffed animals of, and seen them in my little TV shows and books and stuff. It's when you see them in person that
Yeah.
it really drives home, and that connection with that individual animal, even if all they've learned about that bearded dragon is that this one likes crickets, they can go home and read all the stats they want, but it's that moment that has triggered that curiosity. And I think ultimately that's what makes the difference, and why having animal ambassadors, you really make that connection with people.
Well, one of the things you just said, which just reminded me that has been research on that there's usually one thing, one event that really solidifies something for, let's say, a child. It could be an adult too, but it's often children. And you said that they could go home and they can read and whatever, but it's that meeting that animal that is alive and has the likes and dislikes and all of those kinds of things that you find out about, or it flies during a program or something like that. That's the trigger that will have them go back and all of a sudden do all the reading. And now, of course, they can Google anything and really just I've met children that, like, I was with dinosaurs when I was a kid, that kids will come into the Raptor Center where I work and they know everything about turkey vultures because they met our turkey vulture the year earlier, and they were obsessed with turkey vultures because we found them interesting and we told them several things that were very quote unquote cool or whatever, that, and they got to meet them. So I think what you're saying is you're hitting upon a lot of really good points, because not everybody is going to have that aha moment and say, I'm going to be a bird trainer or an animal trainer. That's okay. We all did, but that's okay that people didn't. What we want that empathetic connection so that it leads to other actions. So, like, if they see a snake in their yard, they're not necessarily going to step on it right away or kill it right away, that they're going to stop and think about it. And even down to the point where, as they get to be an adult, and maybe I'm reaching too much, they're going to be on city councils and they're going to be on the school boards. They're going to vote. And we need people who are advocates for conservation, because that ball python can't vote.
You're exactly right. That's the next step, right? Is creating the generation then that will take it to the next step. We'll take the next steps. We'll vote in favor of saving habitat for garter snakes or the local rattlesnake or the turkey vultures or whatever that animal is. We're trying to create those good stewards of the environment. That's the ultimate goal. And it goes back to having a more personal connection with those animals. They're no longer just a species or a concept, but they have names, they have individual personalities, and that's different, right? It's
Right.
a different thing.
And the other thing, I think, also piggybacking on what Jackie said earlier about kids going home and stuff and learning more things, it is not just the ambassador animal in and of itself usually. It's all those other supporting things. My family went out to the nature center and did a hike, and we saw a live red-tailed hawk flying by. I read something. They watched wildcrats on TV, and they had something on hawks. It's all of those other kind of supporting materials, because partly you never know what is going to be the catch for somebody. It could be that red-tailed hawk on the glove. but it might not be. It could be that it was the red-tailed hawk on the glove, and then I went to a nature center and did a nature hike, and we saw wild ones. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the thing that did it all for me. So we need it all. For me, it's always been the long game because it's not usually okay. Wave my magic wand. It's magic. You love raptors now, and you're going to do everything in your power to conserve them. Blah blah blah. The rest of your life. That's not how it works. It's got to be a lot of different touches in a lot of different ways. I wish it could be shorter, but
It can be,
yeah.
but what you're talking about really is comes back to influencing culture, right? And
Hmm.
influencing the way people feel as a group. And
Hmm.
you can't just change that overnight. That's like you said, many touches and many different ways and coming from many different angles. You
Right.
want to touch the heart, you want to touch the mind, you want to reach out to, all those different levels and hopefully build a society that cares about the environment. Cool.
And we know it works. And how
Hmm.
do I know it works? So I work for the Raptor Center, which you guys know. And we have seen, and we have a world renowned hospital, right, for injured and orphaned raptors. Well, we've seen a reduction in the number of hawks that get shot, for example, or eagles that get shot. There are a lot more urban red-tailed hawks and eagles and other types of raptors that nest in the urban environment, and people are very happy to see them and very happy. We hear this all the time. This is quote unquote my red-tailed hawk nest or my eagle's nest or
Hmm.
that kind of thing, and I want to protect it.
Hmm.
So we hear it all the time. So we know it works, but it just takes a long time. And it takes law changes and regulations and a lot of other things too. But it to me it's pretty amazing where we came from.
Yeah.
Kind of where we came
Yeah.
from hundreds of years ago at Hawk Ridge in northern Minnesota shooting the birds
Hmm.
during migration. But now that's not what they do. They count them, they ban them, they invite people up to come watch them. It's slow to turn that ship, but it's turning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think, as people in our position as educators working with these animals, we owe them the service, well, one, for them to be working with them the right way, but also to kind of tailor our messaging to set the individual up to make those little micro changes. So you
Yeah.
hook them with like the personal info about the bird
Mhm.
and then give some small conservation messaging, choosing snap traps over poison, or not shooting a hawk, or whatever the little thing is that they can change, as opposed to focusing on the doom and gloom that's out there.
Right.
Focus on the little positive impacts they can make. And I think all those little positive impacts together are what starts the wheels turning.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. Doom and gloom is I mean, we have to be realistic, but at the same time, if that's all we are is doom and gloom, who would want to do anything?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing you can do. I mean, I can't change anything. It's the world's horrible. But if we give those little messages and talk about how cool some of these animals are and what they do in the environment, blah, blah, blah. Um, yeah, I think that, yeah, that's how we change the world.
I just had a flash. It sounded to me like we were talking about not labeling, right? This is an analogous kind of conversation. When you talk about doom and gloom, you're just labeling all these bad things are happening. Bad, it's all bad, it's all bad, it's
Bad,
all bad.
bad, bad. Hmm.
Yeah, right. But when you're talking about the kind of things that Jackie said, you're giving behavioral changes that you can make, you're giving actions, you're operationalizing.
Operationalizing the behavior. Oh
Look
my
at
gosh.
that. Boom.
Mic drop. Okay, we're done here.
Don't
We're
drop
done
it,
here.
Gail. It looks expensive.
It is expensive. Yes, I'm on a mic.
Yeah.
Okay, so it really sounds like one of our arguments is like, yeah, it's great to have live animals, but we do need to be realistic about it because
Yeah.
so folks are like, oh, okay, I've got to get live animals because that's the hook we need. But there are challenges with having live animals, whether it's at a nature center or rehab center or whatever, as an ambassador. So how do you decide to have ambassadors? What can you use in alternatives? And if you do decide to have ambassadors, then how do you choose what ambassadors you should have?
I mean, all really valid questions, and questions people should ask themselves more because these are living creatures that hopefully are a lifetime commitment for, you and your
Hmm.
facility. So before, bringing on any kind of animal ambassador, live animal, it's really a matter of resources. Do you and your staff have the time? Do you have the expertise? Do you have the space? Do you have the money? What goes into the types of animals you're looking for? What goes into your program and your messaging? Like how you select a species to have really should support your message. So, I mean, at Tracy Aviary, we have birds that I work with as ambassadors from all around the world, but I don't see, somebody going out and getting a ground hornbill at your
Oh,
local.
let's hope not. Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope not.
Let's hope
Um,
not.
that bird, is an awesome bird, but it's really not going to drive home the messaging that you would be hitting to your target audience. So I think it's all about having a plan, honestly, having some discussions about what your goals are for your organization, looking more at
Mhm.
the big picture before you focus down on, bringing an animal in that you're just not ready for or isn't going to be properly worked with or utilized in your facility.
All right. That's lovely. I mean, that's talking about a collection plan, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So Melissa, we've got a collection plan. We know we want, I don't know, a couple raptors and maybe we'll
Mhm.
get a couple snakes. So, okay, now we need to get into the nitty-gritty. So that means what?
I
Mhm.
mean, we really have to talk about resources. What resources do you have to draw upon? One of the biggest mistakes that I've seen made a lot in the past, and I think the tide has changed quite a bit in the last 20 years or so. But I think one of the biggest mistakes was not really fully understanding the amount of time and energy it takes to properly care for these animals in human
Mhm.
care. The amount of you got to have the right diet, and you got to know how to prepare it. And you got to know what the amounts are, and you have to know how to weigh your animals in order to make sure that they're healthy. You need veterinary care. You need all sorts of, housing. You need, if you live in a place like where you live, Gail, you need lots of protection from winter. If you live
Mhm.
farther south, you need the opposite. So there's all these considerations, and that doesn't even start to talk about the training aspects, right? And
Mhm.
how you have to care for their psychological welfare, enrichment and things to look at. And, so I think there's a huge conversation to be had about resources. And if you decide that you have the resources to move forward and pursue adding ambassador animals to your collection instead of doing biofacts or the other sorts of programming, which is also an important part of environmental education. If you decide to move forward, I think you need to then be very realistic and transparent with what resources you have available, including trainers and including experience and enrichment opportunities for the animals. And
Mhm.
how many programs do you expect this animal to participate in? Is it realistic? I'm certainly not going to ask an animal to participate in more programs than I'm going to ask one of my people to participate in. And
Mhm.
I look at the animals as coworkers and highly valued coworkers who have a smaller voice than I do. So I need to be listening more carefully to what they're saying. And so I think looking at the resources. So back to answering your question, where is this animal going to live? How is it going to be transported? Who's going to take care of it? Where are you going to get the food? Where are you going to find the veterinarian who has expertise in wildlife and can help you with annual exams as well as any issues that might arise? I think that's really the number one spot. And then to what Jackie was saying, it's about the messaging that you're trying to get across. So those
Mhm.
two pieces have to be married very closely. Your resources combined with what your message is going to be, what your plan is for this animal, and what your programming message is.
Right.
Yeah.
I am going to jump in there because one of the things that I've seen, especially I work a lot with nature centers, and what happens is that someone who has a lot of training experience, for example, who has maybe started the program, is leaving for some reason,
Mhm.
and so they're looking to hire somebody to replace that person, and that person probably does a lot of teaching, right, is a naturalist, and so the administration often will hire based on those skills that they see in the person that they're interviewing, right? And then they'll say as a, afterthought, oh, you've handled red-tailed hawks, you interned at X place or Y place. Oh, then you can be in charge of the ambassador animals.
Yeah.
Without finding out, exactly what kind of skills they have. So I think that is another one of the resources. If you don't have the skills to train these animals and maintain them and those kinds of things, how are you going to get them?
Yep.
How are you going to get those skills? It's hard when, I'm doing Zoom calls, trying to help people learn how to train a red-tailed hawk, over Zoom.
Yeah.
It's, and they're doing their darndest, but it's hard.
And
Yeah.
it's so frustrating to see that, because those people put into that position, right, call you because they want to do right by the animal.
Exactly.
And they have sometimes zero background.
Mhm.
Literally, they've held a bird on their glove a few times. And so they're put into this position where they almost
Right.
can't win, and the animal is the one that's suffering for it. And so what I interpret that to be is that the management, the administration, isn't taking seriously the care of these animals. They aren't educating themselves as to what these animals need and how they can go out and find that right person to come in and take care of those animals.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
this is a big generalization, because there's
Absolutely.
nature centers that
Yeah.
the administration is just phenomenal and they know what's needed and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Right.
But often I think administrations treat the wildlife that are used as ambassadors like biofacts.
Yeah.
They don't treat them like living, breathing beings. And so then you get a whole culture that is like, no, that animal has to do this program.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then that sets the handler up for, uh, you know, failure in a lot of ways. And then the animal is the one who, quote unquote, pays for it.
Yeah. And I think one parallel to that is when you go and see a program, uh, it looks easy. You just see the
Hmm.
bird just go into a crate or just sit there on the glove or fly right over people's heads, and you don't necessarily realize that everything that goes into that, from the relationship to the time and the patience and days, weeks, months, years for some individuals. And so you'll get people, especially people that are higher up in an organization, travel to another facility and see this and are like,
Right.
well, I mean, we're going to go get a raven.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. Or a
I
bald eagle. Let's get a bald eagle.
I
We want a
saw
bald
that
eagle.
raven recycling at another facility, and we can do that. We have birds, and it's just like a hard line, to balance there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To your point, Gail, not all centers are like that. I think
Of
Right.
we interact with these folks who are in that position more often,
Right.
because in our roles we get called a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is in that position, they need help, and so they reach out, thankfully, to one of us or to multiples of us or somebody we know in the field who can help them. And good for them. I just wish they weren't in that position. Now there are plenty of other
Exactly.
places who do understand, and that, but we just don't run into them as much because they're not calling us for assistance in the same way or this with the same frequency. So
Exactly.
yeah, to
Yeah,
your
Exactly.
point, I think we need to call out and not make it sound like all
very
these
true.
are terrible. There are a lot of lovely, wonderful places with excellent trainers and terrific educators. We just feel for the ones who are struggling to
Yeah.
do their best. Yeah.
The one other thing I wanted to kind of glom onto is something that you said, Melissa, that and it's a cultural thing in a place, is thinking of these ambassadors as coworkers.
Mm. Hmm.
I love that so much
Hmm.
because I think it elevates them, puts them in a different position,
Hmm.
makes your perspective different. Because when, of course, the general public, they see a red-tailed hawk in the glove and they want to pet the bird, right?
Yeah.
That's often a common question. And it was like, well, we don't for this reason, but it's also a coworker, and these these animals don't like to be petted, so we don't do it.
Communicating that is to my team is something that I always feel is important, is that we treat these animals as coworkers, and I treat you with respect, and I expect you to treat him with respect, and I expect you to treat this animal with respect. And it's a culture that you can bring to a team that's working with animals that is appropriate for human interaction as well as interacting with animals. And I think just having that sense of respect all the way around, it is beneficial, but also, as you said, it elevates the animals in a way that perhaps we're not accustomed to thinking of them in our culture.
Right. What do you think about that, Jackie?
I couldn't agree more, and when you do, so if you think of it how you would with a coworker, where you're empowering them to make decisions and empowering them to be, in control of their environment, and think about how your coworkers would thrive with encouragement and good communication, and then parallel that to how you're working with your ambassador animals. I mean, you're getting these resilient, awesome ambassadors that really are doing their role, and the more comfortable and confident the individual, the closer they'll get to the public. You can expand your programming, like all around treating these animals as coworkers and treating them how you would want to be treated is the best way to look at it.
I can't thank my guests enough for finally consenting to talking with me on our podcast. And many, many, many thanks to Jackie Kozlowski, Senior Trainer at Tracy Aviary in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Melissa Moore, Curator of Behavioral Husbandry and Ambassador Animals at the St. Louis Aquarium. Thank you guys so, so much. Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release is a production of Partners for Wildlife, working hand in hand with wildlife rehabilitators and the veterinarians to support them to improve the welfare of orphaned, ill, and injured wildlife. Our executive producer is me, Gail Buell. I'm the Partnership Coordinator for Partners for Wildlife with the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine. Our producer is Reese Rosato. To learn more about the Raptor Center and Partners for Wildlife, visit the Raptor Center at umn.edu.